Hi folks, it's Andy. Welcome to today's Kendo rant. Sorry it's been a while since I put one up. I am back on schedule, hopefully, to be putting them back up more regularly. Obviously it's the Christmas season and all that, so there will be a little bit of break in service because of all that. But it looks like I've got a structure in place now where I can put more videos out a little bit more frequently. So thank you very much for your patience with that. Obviously you can probably tell from my voice that I'm sounding a bit croaky. I am getting over something of a cold, which yeah, that's kind of stopped me filming for the last few days as well, because I wasn't able to talk. But it's coming back now, so yeah, let's get straight into the questions. Why do you think people take up Nito? What are your thoughts on Fuji Ryoichi sensei passing 8th dan test doing Nito? Okay, so first, why do I think people take up Nito? Lots of reasons. Obviously, each person's reasons for taking up Nito are their own. I think the reason for taking it up is somewhat sort of less relevant than actually how they progress down the road of Kendo. I think that lots of people take it up because obviously it looks different, it looks kind of cool, it reminds them of Miyamoto Musashi, something like that. I think most of us go through that phase, especially in the West, of like wanting to be a bit different and kind of wanting to try something a bit different. I think there's a lot of people that have kind of dabbled in it even. Yeah, I mean, I think as long as you follow it in the kind of, whatever your reasons are for taking it up, I think the important thing to remember is that Nito, just like Ito, it's not about hitting and blocking or hitting and not being hit. The criteria for Yuko Datotsu are the same, so they still have to be done with Riai, with Kentai no Ichi, and yeah, good opportunities. You can't just kind of bash around at your opponent, and if you hit, you get a point, which I think is something that several people that do Nito often actually miss, because I think there are some people that take up Nito because they're not very good at Chudan, and they're not, it's not that they're not very good at Chudan, but they're not, they don't feel as successful in Chudan as they'd like to, so they sort of take up Nito and they feel like they make more hits. Because obviously lots of people aren't so used to playing against Nito. They have another sword that they can kind of move the sword out of the way and stuff. They can block. And yeah, if you kind of focus down that path, then it's easy to kind of move away from what you're supposed to be doing and moving away actually from proper Yuko Datotsu. But you mentioned Fuji Sensei, who of course is a very famous Nito player. He's got beautiful Kendo. His 8th dan grading test, I think, is on YouTube actually, and it's a brilliant example of wonderful Kendo. It's clear to see why he passed the 8th dan exam. But again, that's not really anything to do with the fact that he's doing Nito. It's not really because he was doing Nito. I think it's somewhat irrelevant because he's still performing Kendo in the same way with the same sort of goals in mind, if that makes sense. So yeah, I really enjoyed watching his grading, and I think it was a great thing that they obviously achieved the 8th dan. Next one. Right, for Kendo clubs outside of Japan, what sort of venues make the best practice spaces? In particular, any tips for overcoming recalcitrant leisure centres intimidated by Kendo's kiai and fumikomi? So I guess you mean obviously what make the best spaces, but how do you get past leisure centres that are kind of not very cooperative towards you, shouting and stamping on the floor? Well, the best practice spaces tend to be anywhere that's got a suitable floor and a high enough ceiling. Dance studios tend to be good because they often have mirrors, but they're often small, so it depends on the size of the club. That's my favourite type of practice space actually, is like a dance studio, especially if there's mirrors, because I think mirrors are a super helpful tool in Kendo practice, or any other sort of sports hall, really. Like I say, the important thing is whether it's got a floor that's suitable for you to sort of stamp on in barefoot without getting hurt. Obviously, you also have to kind of take into consideration that in the West, certainly in the UK, for example, the culture is different to how it is in Japan. So it's normal for people to use sports halls with their shoes on and potentially even shoes that they wore outside. So the floors can be very, very dirty. So for this reason, in my club, for example, we always clean the floor before practice. We do zokin gake, which is where you get a zokin, which is a kind of cloth. You wet it and you run it across the floor. I'm sure you've seen examples of such a method. So yeah, in terms of how you overcome those sort of leisure centres, I've been in this position before many years ago, where the hall we were hiring. This was before I moved out to Japan, but the hall we were hiring, they had like a yoga studio next door or something, and the yoga people complained and said, "Oh, you're too loud. Can you keep it down?" And in the end, I just changed the dojo, changed the sports hall, because my answer was no. I don't think it's good to be kind of only doing half-hearted shouts and stuff like that. So my sort of answer to that was just to find another place that was more accommodating. Not ideal, I know, but I think with enough effort you could probably find it. Next one. I have a technical question about Sayuu men. I've always been told that during Sayuu men suburi, the left hand should be in the centre and the kensen is slightly off, just like it would be a men in front of us. The exact same movement like during kirikaishi. But I see a lot of high-level kendoka during Sayuu suburi are leaving the kensen in the centre and the hands are slightly off. Which version is the proper one? Okay, it depends on what you mean, first of all, by high-level kendoka. Because the way you describe it in the first place is absolutely correct, okay? This is obviously a small shinai. I'm going to try and move back so I can show. But when you hit either left or right man, your left hand should be in the middle. Same on the other side, it should be in the middle of your body, like this. I'm obviously sat on a chair, which is a bit skewed, but it wants to be in the middle of your body, like this. I don't know if you can see. And the same as you come down the other side, this is still in the middle, and this is still in the middle. And if anything, yeah, the kensen is slightly off center. Some people actually bring the kensen all the way to the middle, all the way back onto center. With kind of more like this, but they don't bring their left hand off. What you're describing obviously is where they're kind of hitting like this and like this. This is absolutely incorrect. Absolutely incorrect. You have to keep your left hand in the middle, and yeah, like you said, the kensen's slightly off. I don't know who you mean by high-level kendoka, but nobody that depends. Obviously, sometimes you see people doing kirikaishi, doing it very fast. You see this a lot. Is even if they do the very nice suburi like this, then they go to kirikaishi and they start doing it like this. Yeah, you can't be doing that either. It doesn't matter what you see other kendoka doing, that's how you should be doing it. If there are high-level kendoka, and again, it depends what you mean by high-level, kendoka doing Sayuu suburi like that, with their left hand off the center, then they're doing it wrong. Okay, next one. This question, I'm not sure if it's a real question or if it's like a bot or something, I don't know. But it literally says, how to win in Kendo, what should you do? You should subscribe to the Kendo show. And buy your book from KendoStar. Next, here's a question. How is teaching of seme? Okay, so these questions now are coming from the Kendo Show Early Access group. There's a link in the description. Make sure you're in that group if you're not already. Obviously, it's free to join, of course. It's on Facebook. You just join. We approve you in. And it's a great place because you can post your questions there. And you don't just get me answering you in the video. There's a load of other people doing Kendo in there of all different levels. So it's a bit of a forum for discussion, really. So you get some really nice answers. So definitely get in that. It's in the description just there. So here's a question. How much is the teaching of seme emphasized in Japan? I feel that we talk about seme in the West, possibly because we're dealing with mostly adult beginners, and I wonder if it's taught in such an explicit way in Japan to the Japanese, or is it something you're expected to mostly pick up along the way? That's a great question. I love it. It's a funny one, really. I think with that, it's it really depends on the teacher. It really depends on the teacher, because obviously all teachers have different different methods, should we say. But in my experience of teaching kids, talking about seme was something that we did a lot, but we never described what seme was. It's kind of interesting. I never saw a teacher say like, oh, this is what seme is. They just say, do seme. And I've seen that a lot. So to some extent, there's a lot of emphasis put on it, but the kids are sort of expected to understand what's meant by it and pick it up along the way. Part of that's a linguistic thing, because obviously they understand the word seme naturally because it's part of their language, though it's not like a normal word that they would say every day, but it is something that's grammatically used for when you are sort of aggressively approaching something or somebody. It's kind of done a little bit differently. I've never, probably if I've never been a university student in Japan, so potentially like at university or high school, there's more in-depth explanations, but I doubt it, actually. I kind of doubt it. Because, I take that back. I'm sure there is, but it's often presented more like kind of tactics in a way, as opposed to like, this is seme, because they don't use the word seme or other Japanese words as pieces of terminology like we do. Like I say, it's their language, so it's kind of fluid. But yeah, I think the concept of seme, what we consider the concept of seme, is very much emphasized in Japan to the Japanese students of all levels. So yeah, I think it's just probably we in the West tend to try to explain it more because we don't naturally have the concept in our everyday language like they do, if that makes sense. At least I think that's how it is. Okay, next. I think this one got quite a lot of comments answering it, but I'm going to answer it anyway because I always answer them if I can. Are there any regulations against switching kamae mid-shiai? If not, have you seen it happen? Is it effective? Okay, so what you mean is, obviously, somebody starts shiai in chudan, and then they go to jodan, and then they go back to chudan, or then they try to do hasso no kamae. Yeah, there's a whole series of videos I've talked about that. Excuse me. No, there's no regulations against switching kamae mid-shiai. It's absolutely fine to do so. I've seen it happen like once or twice, never by anybody that was really any good. Someone did mention in the comments actually that Chiba Sensei sometimes switch between chudan and jodan. That's true. I never saw him do it in a shiai. But it's not to say he wouldn't have done it. And if he did, I'm sure he was good at doing that. But then what you tend to find is most really, really good Jodan players are also really good at Chudan as well. There's not many that are like really good at Jodan and then rubbish at Chudan. I've never seen that, I don't think. So, it's perfectly fine to do so. Is it effective? I don't really know. It depends on the level of your opponent, really. If your opponent's really good, probably not. Probably not. If your opponent's kind of inexperienced, then yeah, I can imagine so. Especially if you go from Chudan to Jodan, because they may never have done that before. But yeah, obviously each case is different. It could be, without seeing something specific, then it's hard to really say. Okay, next one. My questions are about travelling to Japan to practice Kendo. First question would be, is there anything important from a dojo etiquette standpoint that travellers should keep in mind that maybe is not part of Western Kendo culture, or maybe doesn't hold the same importance? My second question is how hard it is to practice if you're not fluent in Japanese. Is it common to find English speaking sensei, or would it be your opinion that one should be more comfortable with the language before attempting such a trip? Right, okay, this is a fantastic question. I'm sure lots of people have got it, so let me just take a sip of coffee to answer it. Because my voice is going. sorry about that. Okay, so first about the etiquette stuff. Yeah. There's a few exceptions, but generally you don't want to just rock up with your boga and say, hey, can I join in practice? There are exceptions. There are places that you can do that, that host open practices, like the Butokuden in Kyoto, and there's a few like local budokans in different areas of Japan that like have an open practice. And yeah, I've done that before. Just rocked up with my gear, said, "Oh hi, can I practice?" If I hadn't been able to speak Japanese, that would have been a lot more difficult, though, I must say. So yeah, the first thing you want to do is you want to practice at a dojo. You need to be getting in touch with them first, somehow. And the best way to do that, to be honest, if you're going to go on to be honest, I think you're going to have a hard time visiting visiting Japan to do Kendo if you don't have any contacts out there already, if you don't have any sort of friends or people that can help you while you're over there. People that can speak Japanese, it's going to be very difficult for you, because unless you just practice at these open practices, but to be honest, you won't gain that much from it. You're going to be better off if you've got somebody that can help you out whilst you're over there, and sort of take you to where you need to go, and make sure that that the dojo knows that you're coming and they're happy for you to come. They know what sort of level you're at. Somebody that can help decipher what's being said to you, that sort of thing. So my advice would be try and get yourself in a position where you've got that first before you kind of invest in going over there, rather than just turning up with your gear. If you're going over there on holiday anyway, and not specifically to do Kendo, then by all means take your boga. And if you're going to like Kyoto or some other place like that's got an open practice, then yeah, by all means jump in and have a go. No one's going to stop you doing that. But how much you'll benefit from it without understanding Japanese and with no one to translate, it's one of them. In regards to your second question, is it common to find English-speaking sensei? No, absolutely not. It's not common to find English-speaking people in Japan. Never mind Kendo sensei. There's a few people that say they can speak English, and then once you get past the first few sentences, then they're really out of the depth. But there's sensei, not very many. In fact, I'll tell you a story. When I used to, not the first time, the sort of second time I went over to practice in Japan for an extended period before I moved over there. I spent a month at a high school, yeah, it was intense. And I didn't really speak Japanese, to be honest. I didn't speak Japanese at the time. Like I say, it was before I moved over there. I just wanted to go and do Kendo. I thought it was like in the West, really, where like if you do Kendo, you can just go wherever you want and practice, which I think is a really great thing about Kendo over in Europe, certainly. I assume it's like that in other places too. I've been all over the world doing Kendo. And in Japan, it's not quite like that. You've got to kind of go through the right channels to make sure that you're welcome and you're not going to upset the wrong people if you just turn up. Which I think is a real shame, because I think Kendo should be more like it is here, where it's open and everyone should enjoy it together. But anyway, I managed to go and practice at this place, and it was through an introduction. I didn't just turn up. It was through a family introduction. And yeah, I spent a month practicing there, and it was tough. It was real tough, and I didn't understand half what was being said to me. But the kids there were really nice. They really helped me through it still. And the teacher said to me on the last day, there was two things that happened. Every day we'd do karigeko, and I was like in my early 20s at the time, so I was quite a bit older than the kids. I was like 24, 25, something like that. So it's quite a bit older than the kids there, but I wasn't like old. I was still in my competitive. I was sort of still reasonably near the beginning of my competitive career, to be fair. And yeah, every day we do karigeko. And when I went there, like when you're an adult in Japan, if you go to a high school, even at sort of in your early 20s, 24, 25 sort of thing, then you're treated as a sensei in a way. So, you know, even the sensei, the school's like, oh, please sit on the sensei side and stuff like this. And I was like, no, please, I want to practice with the students and kind of get as much of it as I can. So I did everything that the students did. I just went in and practiced together with the students. And every day we did karigeko at the end of 3.5 hour practice. And I was already really super tired by that stage, by the way. But we get to karigeko, and I think it was like a rotation thing, you know. And I think after about 10 or 12 rotations every day, sensei would come over to me, and I was dying by that point. I wasn't sort of, you know, used to doing that sort of intense level of practice at that time. And I was really dying after this, and sensei would come over to me, tap me on my shoulder, say, oh, Andy, you can stop now, don't worry, you can stop. And I'd be, oh, thank you, sensei, thank you. And I'd sit down and I'd take off my men, and the kids would do another sort of 5 or 6 rotations, and then we finish. Whilst I was kind of panting in the corner, recovering. And yeah, at the end, on the last day after the last practice, my wife was very kind and to translate what the sensei said to me. He said, I've got some advice for you, the 2 pieces of advice for you. He didn't come to me, I asked him, I said, well, have you got some advice for me? He said, yeah, 2 things. He said, number 1, when sensei comes and says to you, you can stop doing karigeko now, thank you, sensei, and smiling and stopping is the wrong answer. He said, you say, no, sensei, I can do some more, and you should keep doing it. Oh, I thought, okay, great. I wish I'd known that on the first day. But yeah, that really stuck with me, of course. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing he said, and this is coming back to the question after that huge kind of detour. The second thing he said is, learn Japanese. He said, learn to speak Japanese. He said, because I don't know any good senseis that can speak English. And yeah, and back in those days, that was true. There wasn't any senseis that could really speak English, not in Japan. There are 1 or 2 now, actually. There's a handful of them, actually, really good ones, who I actually know personally. And they, you know, Japanese people, Japanese senseis at high grade, sort of 7th dan, even 8th dan, that speak English very, very well. But they are very rare. There's not many of them at all. So yeah, learning Japanese to me was put as part of the shugyo, the journey of actually learning Kendo. And actually, to kind of go off on this a little bit, to kind of rant on it a little bit, I actually think it was a really good piece of advice, because even with English speaking sensei, there's a lot of, the thing is when you learn to speak Japanese language, you are also you can't really do so properly without also gaining a better understanding of how Japanese society and Japanese culture works, and that itself is really closely interlinked with Kendo practice, especially in Japan. So, yeah, I actually do believe that learning to speak Japanese, learning to understand Japanese has been one of the most important things that I did to improve my my Kendo ability, because it gave me such kind of broad access to information and to practice. Because I was literally able to communicate with sensei. I was able to find out about specific Kendo practices, for example, which maybe I wouldn't have known about before, and be allowed to go to them because the senseis would be comfortable with me coming because they knew that I could understand what they were saying. Things like it's given me a new kind of, it gave me a whole new scope of learning material. I can, you know, I can watch videos on YouTube that are in Japanese and understand what they're saying. We've talked about these books before. Where is it? There's the grading book that I often rant from. It's on my desk here somewhere. My desk's a total mess because we're so busy. But yeah, like books that are written in Japanese. stuff like that. So whole loads of study material too. So I definitely think that if you want to really excel in Kendo as much as you possibly can, then I do think that you would benefit from doing your best to learn to speak and understand Japanese. So yeah, that's basically it. That's all the questions for today. I hope that answered them. I hope it all made sense. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to do the whole like, share, subscribe, you know, all that sort of stuff. If you haven't done it by now, then yeah, I shouldn't really be saying it because you already know. Join the Kendo Show Early Access group. The link's in the description as well. And most importantly, shop at KendoStar. KendoStar.com. That's the equipment website that I run, obviously. That's what pays for me to be able to do this channel. As well as the fact that it's all absolutely awesome equipment at great prices as well. Speaking of which, obviously with that time of year, we've got a holiday sale going on right now, only until the 28th. I know that it's popular having a sort of holiday Christmas sale sort of thing amongst companies, but I really do think that you won't get better elsewhere. Obviously I would say that, but you know, KendoStar's got the reputation it has for a good reason. We're well known for having really good equipment that's specifically designed for the international community, with fantastic service, fast delivery, stuff like that. So yeah, it really is worth checking out. If you haven't done so already, that's KendoStar.com. So enough of plugging that. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.